The world has always been shaped by water. Oceans rise and fall, rivers carve valleys, and rain nourishes the land. But there are moments when water does not simply nurture life, it destroys it. From the earliest whispers of human memory, stories of cataclysmic floods have threaded their way through myths, legends, and oral histories. They speak of waters rising higher than the tallest mountains, of entire civilizations swallowed beneath unrelenting waves, leaving only echoes behind. Imagine, for a moment, standing on a cliff overlooking a boundless sea, waves crashing against jagged rocks, wind tearing at your cloak as the horizon blurs in a storm so vast it seems endless. It is in this imagery, in the raw terror and majesty of water unchained, that humanity's oldest fears and questions are born. Almost every culture, from the banks of the Euphrates to the islands of the Pacific, has carried within its myths stories of a great flood. The Sumerians spoke of Utnapishtim, the survivor of a deluge sent by the gods. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha built an ark to survive a cataclysm that wiped out humankind. In the Americas, ancient civilizations spoke of great waters reshaping the world. Even the story most familiar to modern audiences, that of Noah's Ark, carries haunting similarities to far older legends. These are not merely fanciful tales told to entertain or frighten. They're striking parallels across continents and epics hint at something far older, something that might have transcended culture and geography. What could have inspired such a near-universal memory of a flood? Were these floods merely local catastrophes, exaggerated in the telling over centuries? Or could they reflect a singular event or a series of events that reshaped the Earth long before the rise of known civilizations? Scholars have debated this for generations, and yet no consensus has been reached. Traditional archaeology, grounded in the fragments of recorded history, leaves gaping holes when it comes to the periods before the Sumerians, the Egyptians, or the Indus Valley peoples. And it is in these gaps, in the silent stretches of time that official history struggles to account for, that the possibility emerges of something extraordinary. A civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, that it left only whispers behind when the waters rose. Consider the implications. A civilization capable of constructing monumental architecture, mastering early forms of science and astronomy, and possibly even developing written language, now erased, leaving barely a trace beneath layers of soil, stone, and ocean. Its knowledge, its stories, and its very existence might have been reduced to myth, surviving only in fragments disguised as allegory. The thought is both thrilling and terrifying. Could entire cities have disappeared beneath rising seas, their streets, temples, and libraries now resting at the bottom of oceans, silent and untouched for tens of thousands of years? And yet, hints of such wonders persist. From submerged structures off distant shores to sudden advancements in human knowledge appearing inexplicably in the archaeological record, there are glimpses that suggest the past may be far stranger than textbooks admit. In this journey, we will trace these echoes of the past, traveling across continents and diving into depths where light barely reaches. We will listen to myths that have survived countless generations, sift through geological evidence that tells of massive, sudden inundations, and explore the possibility that humanity is not the first to rise and fall under the shadow of the waters. Each clue, each anomaly, builds a tapestry of questions that challenge everything we think we know about the history of civilization. We will examine maps that predate recorded knowledge, ruins that defy conventional timelines, and artifacts that hint at a sophistication we are only beginning to comprehend. And yet, as we begin, there is a tension, a quiet whisper beneath the waves. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether such a civilization existed, but why evidence of it has been so thoroughly obscured. History, after all, is often written by the survivors, and what survives is rarely complete. What has been lost beneath the waters may hold truths too profound, too destabilizing for mainstream history to confront. This is the edge we stand upon, at the intersection of myth and reality, where imagination and evidence converge. It is here, in the shadows of memory and the depths of forgotten oceans, that our story begins. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the world as it might have been before the flood, a world filled with wonders and knowledge beyond our imagination. Then picture the waters rising, sweeping everything away, leaving only fragments, stories, and the silent, rolling seas. That vision, terrifying in its scope, is the key to understanding why humanity has never forgotten the flood. It lingers in our collective memory, hidden in the myths we dismiss, in the ruins we ignore, and in the uncharted depths of our planet. And so, as we step forward into the mysteries of the past, we ask the question that has haunted explorers, scholars, and dreamers alike. What if the flood didn't just erase lives, but an entire civilization, a world older and wiser than our own? Across the world, from the earliest whispers of recorded history to the myths passed down through countless generations, the story of the Great Flood appears again and again, like a refrain echoing across time. It is as if the memory of one immense, watery catastrophe has been encoded in the collective imagination of humanity. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts Utnapishtim, who survived a devastating flood sent by the gods to wipe out humankind, preserving life in a massive boat. In the ancient Greek tradition, Deucalion and Pyrrha are the sole survivors of Zeus's wrathful inundation, tasked with repopulating the earth. Far across the oceans, the Native American Hopi spoke of waters that once covered the land, and the Mesoamerican Aztec legends tell of a deluge that reshaped the earth and its inhabitants. Even in the biblical narrative, Noah's Ark survives as the story most widely recognized, yet it bears an uncanny resemblance to these far older myths. These stories are more than coincidental similarities. The parallels are striking. Divine or cosmic forces bring cataclysmic floods, a select few survive to continue human life, and the waters leave a transformed world in their wake. Some skeptics argue that these are simply archetypal tales, invented independently in cultures across the globe to explain local disasters or moral lessons. Yet, the sheer consistency of these accounts, the scope, the devastation, the survival, and the rebirth of civilization, suggests something more profound. Could these myths be faint echoes of real events that affected the entire planet? Could they preserve, in allegory, the memory of a global catastrophe so immense it became encoded in human consciousness itself? The implications are staggering. If these stories are more than myth, then the flood might not have been a localized event or a metaphorical warning, but a literal historical phenomenon that reshaped the world before the dawn of recorded history. This realization shifts our understanding of human progress. What if civilizations we consider the first were not the earliest at all? What if there were advanced societies predating Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, societies whose knowledge, achievements, and very existence were submerged and erased? The myths may be all that remains, strange, fragmented echoes preserved in ritual, allegory, and religious narrative. Consider the level of detail embedded in these ancient accounts. The Gilgamesh epic describes the construction of a massive vessel, with exact measurements and materials, to withstand a deluge of incomprehensible scale. Noah's story, remarkably similar, depicts divine instructions for preserving life amidst a global flood. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive the destruction of humanity and repopulate the earth, a narrative that carries the same thematic core. These are not vague memories of a storm. They're sophisticated, structured accounts that suggest the storytellers were passing down observations, techniques, and warnings from a time long before their own. Could it be that fragments of true historical knowledge have survived for millennia, disguised as myth? Even in cultures far removed geographically, the motif of the flood appears consistently. In South America, the Incas and Aztecs preserved stories of torrential rains and rising waters, sometimes accompanied by divine punishment. The Hopi in North America speak of multiple worlds ending in water, each giving way to a new creation. In Asia, Chinese myths tell of the great Yu controlling catastrophic floods, diverting rivers to save humanity. Across oceans and continents, the similarities are so precise, the narratives so aligned that the possibility of coincidence seems almost impossible. What is even more compelling is that many of these stories contain subtle hints that the survivors possessed extraordinary knowledge. In Mesopotamia, Utnapishtim is granted immortality, a sign of wisdom or enlightenment. In Greek tales, Deucalion and Pyrrha are instructed in the renewal of humankind, carrying knowledge to a world reshaped by disaster. Even Noah, in preserving samples of life, demonstrates an understanding of biology and preservation. These narratives are not only about survival, but also about continuity, the preservation of knowledge, culture, and perhaps technology across a cataclysm that threatened to erase it all. Modern scholars and researchers have often dismissed these stories as allegorical, warning that literal interpretations can obscure the true cultural meaning of myth. But what if the myths were both literal and symbolic at once? What if they encoded a collective memory of a pre-existing civilization, one advanced enough to be threatened and ultimately erased by a cataclysm? There are hints scattered across time. Traces of structures submerged beneath oceans, enigmatic artifacts predating known civilizations, and sudden leaps in human knowledge that appear inexplicably in the archaeological record. Each clue reinforces the notion that the flood myths are not merely fanciful storytelling. They are records, however fragmented, of a world lost beneath the waves. As we examine these stories, it becomes clear that they were intended to survive, to be retold, to warn future generations. The repetition of flood myths across cultures is not just coincidence. It is a persistent signal across time, as though humanity has been trying to remember, through every possible medium, what once happened. They serve as both caution and guide, urging us to listen closely, to read between the lines, and to consider the possibility that history may be far older and more complex than the conventional timeline allows. And so, as the waters rise and recede in the imagination, a pattern begins to emerge. These myths are like fragments of a shattered mirror, each reflecting a piece of a greater whole. Alone, they might be dismissed as allegory. Together, they suggest a lost chapter of human history, one written not in stone or paper, but in memory, story, and oral tradition. They ask us to look deeper, to explore further, and to question the foundations of what we think we know about civilization's beginnings. In this way, the flood is not just an event. It is a thread connecting humanity across millennia. It bridges continents, cultures, and epochs, leaving behind stories that refuse to be forgotten. It is a reminder that beneath the surface of myth, beneath the currents of legend, may lie truths that challenge the very essence of what we consider history. And as we continue this journey, following the traces left by these ancient waters, we begin to see that the flood myths are not merely tales from the past. They may be the key to uncovering a civilization that history has almost entirely erased. Beneath the surface of the earth, beneath layers of soil, rock, and sand, the planet holds stories older than any written text. Geologists, oceanographers, and archaeologists have long studied these silent witnesses, searching for evidence of events that shaped the earth long before human memory began. Among the most compelling signs are those left by water, the very element that dominates our flood myths. Sediment layers, buried coastlines, and traces of sudden, catastrophic inundations whisper of forces powerful enough to alter landscapes, extinguish civilizations, and rewrite the trajectory of human history. In many parts of the world, scientists have discovered evidence of ancient megafloods, events so enormous they defy conventional explanation. In North America, the channeled scabblands reveal scars left by a torrent of glacial meltwater, rushing with unimaginable speed and volume, carving valleys and canyons in a matter of days. Similar evidence exists in the Black Sea region, where layers of marine sediment suggest a sudden and dramatic rise in water levels thousands of years ago. The event is so cataclysmic that some researchers have proposed it as the source of the flood stories preserved in human memory. Could this have been part of a global phenomenon, an inundation so vast it reached across continents, reshaping the world and the civilizations that inhabited it? The more we examine the Earth, the more we find anomalies that challenge conventional timelines. Submerged landscapes off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean hint at human habitation far older than what mainstream archaeology acknowledges. Stone foundations, artificial platforms, and grid-like structures lie hidden beneath hundreds of feet of water, perfectly preserved in silence. To the untrained eye, these are simply natural formations, the product of erosion and time. But under closer scrutiny, their precise alignments and geometric patterns suggest human hands, skilled and deliberate. The possibility arises that entire cities, once bustling with life and knowledge, now sleep beneath the waves, waiting to be rediscovered. Even the continents themselves bear witness. Geological evidence points to dramatic sea level fluctuations that occurred after the last ice age. As massive ice sheets melted, waters rose rapidly, inundating coastal settlements and forcing survivors to migrate inland. Some of these changes were gradual, but others appear to have been sudden and catastrophic. Archaeologists are only beginning to piece together the full impact, but the pattern is clear. The Earth has a history of flooding events powerful enough to destroy civilizations overnight. The question becomes not whether such floods occurred, but which civilizations they may have swallowed whole, leaving only myth and mystery in their wake. One particularly striking example comes from the submerged city of Varka, off the coast of India. Ancient texts describe it as a thriving metropolis, home to kings and sages, yet underwater explorations have revealed stone structures, walls, and roads now lying in silence beneath the Arabian Sea. Radiocarbon dating suggests that parts of the city may be older than the earliest known urban centers in India. If Dvarka was once part of a larger network of settlements, it implies that sophisticated human activity existed long before conventional history recognizes. Could these be remnants of the same civilization whose memory is encoded in the flood myths spanning the globe? Then there are the sudden sediment deposits found along ancient riverbeds and continental shelves. Layers of clay, silt, and sand, deposited rapidly and over vast areas, suggest that the floods were not isolated events. The scale and speed of these deposits indicate forces beyond normal river flooding or seasonal storms. In some cases, the layers contain traces of human activity, tools, pottery shards, and organic matter, trapped as the water surged. It is as if the floodwaters froze human life in time, preserving fragments for millennia, waiting for modern science to uncover them. Yet despite these signs, mainstream history often struggles to integrate them. Conventional timelines are built upon the rise of the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and other early civilizations, leaving little room for societies that may have existed before them. Evidence that challenges these narratives is often met with skepticism, brushed aside as anomaly or coincidence. And still, the signs persist: submerged ruins, megafloods, and sediment layers that tell a story no textbook can fully explain. They speak of a world where water was both life and destroyer, where entire human achievements could vanish beneath a rising tide, leaving myths to carry their memory. The search for such evidence is not merely academic, it is deeply human. As we dive into the oceans, sift through ancient riverbeds, and analyze geological layers, we are chasing fragments of a past that could reshape our understanding of history itself. Every sediment layer, every submerged wall, and every artifact trapped beneath the waves is a message from a time long before our own. A whisper of civilizations erased not by neglect, but by nature's immense power. The earth itself becomes a library of forgotten knowledge, waiting for those who know how to read its pages. And so, as we examine the physical remnants of floods past, a picture begins to form. We see not just water, but a force capable of rewriting history, of erasing the works of human hands and leaving only traces behind. We see a planet that remembers its own catastrophes in rock and soil, in stone and sediment, patiently waiting for the curious and persistent to uncover its secrets. The evidence is fragmentary, yes, but it is consistent, pointing toward the possibility of something far older and more sophisticated than what conventional history admits. In this section of our journey, we begin to understand that the earth itself carries the memory of the flood. Unlike myths that have been retold and reshaped over millennia, these geological signs are silent but indisputable. They hint at a world submerged, a civilization lost, and a cataclysm so profound that it reshaped human destiny. And as we prepare to explore the ruins hidden beneath the oceans, we carry with us this growing realization that the waters of the past have more to reveal than anyone has dared to imagine. Beneath the calm surface of the oceans, hidden in the silent depths, lie the remnants of worlds long forgotten. Ancient maps, whispers and myths, and fragments of archaeology suggest that there were cities, perhaps entire civilizations, that once thrived where now only water flows. These submerged landscapes hint at a chapter of human history erased not by human hands, but by the immense and unforgiving power of the seas. As divers descend into these mysterious waters, the light fading to deep blue, they enter a world where time seems to stand still, where stone structures, walls, and streets lie untouched, holding secrets that have survived millennia. One of the most famous of these submerged cities is Dwarka, off the coast of Western India. According to legend, Dwarka was the magnificent capital of Krishna, a city of palaces, temples, and streets teeming with life. Modern underwater explorations have revealed stone foundations, walls, and platforms lying beneath the Arabian Sea. Radiocarbon dating suggests these structures could be older than many of India's earliest known urban settlements. The precision of the stonework, the grid-like arrangement of streets, and evidence of sophisticated planning hint at a level of urban sophistication that challenges our understanding of ancient civilizations. If Dwarka is only one example, what other cities may lie hidden, waiting for their stories to be told? Across the world, other submerged anomalies spark similar fascination. Off the coast of Japan lies Yonaguni, a formation that has stirred controversy for decades. At first glance, it appears to be a natural rock formation shaped by centuries of erosion. Yet, closer inspection reveals terraces, steps, and angular structures that suggest intentional design. Some researchers argue that these are remnants of a prehistoric civilization, lost when rising sea levels swallowed the coastline thousands of years ago. Skeptics caution against jumping to conclusions, yet the possibility that such structures are man-made cannot be dismissed lightly. If true, Yonaguni could represent a civilization whose memory has been all but erased from history, preserved only in stone and submerged beneath the relentless sea. The Mediterranean Sea, 2. Holds whispers of ancient urban landscapes. Divers and sonar mapping have identified submerged walls, roads, and ports along the coasts of Egypt, Greece, and Sicily. Some of these structures align with descriptions in myths and ancient texts, hinting at a time when sea levels were lower and these lands were populated by thriving societies. Could these submerged ruins be remnants of civilizations destroyed by sudden flooding? Or were they simply abandoned as climate and geography shifted over centuries? The patterns suggest more than coincidence. Geometric layouts, uniform construction, and the scale of the ruins hint at organized, intelligent societies. Even in the Caribbean and Central America, underwater explorations have revealed structures that defy conventional explanations. Stone platforms, possible pyramids, and road networks have been mapped beneath the shallow seas, suggesting that these regions may once have supported thriving communities before being claimed by rising waters. These discoveries often spark debate. Mainstream archaeology tends to favor gradual explanations, attributing the ruins to natural formations or relatively recent human activity. Yet, the precision of the structures, the apparent planning, and their sudden submersion point toward more dramatic possibilities. Civilizations of considerable sophistication erased almost entirely, leaving only fragments to tease the imagination. What is particularly compelling about these submerged cities is not just their existence, but what they imply about human knowledge before recorded history. The engineering required to build large stone structures, properly aligned and capable of withstanding the test of time and water, suggests an advanced understanding of construction, materials, and possibly even early forms of urban planning. Such sophistication raises questions about what other knowledge may have been lost: astronomy, metallurgy, writing systems, or cultural practices. The flood myths we explored earlier may have preserved, in symbolic form, the memory of these achievements, tales passed down as warnings or allegories for generations. The pattern that emerges is staggering. Across the globe, from India to Japan, from the Mediterranean to the Americas, there are signs of submerged settlements, hints of forgotten civilizations, and evidence that water has claimed what humans once built. The depth and spread of these structures suggest not isolated communities, but thriving societies capable of innovation, organization, and culture. Could it be that the flood, long preserved in myth, was not just a story of divine wrath, but a literal event that erased the foundations of human advancement? Even more tantalizing is the possibility that some knowledge survived. In certain myths, survivors of the flood carry wisdom, instructions, or artifacts into the New World. Perhaps the submerged cities were repositories of learning, destroyed in the waters, but leaving subtle traces in architecture, art, and culture that persisted elsewhere. The alignment of streets, the orientation of temples, and the construction techniques found underwater echo a continuity of knowledge that seems too deliberate to be mere coincidence. These remnants, lying silently beneath the waves, are like messages in a bottle from a world we can scarcely imagine. A civilization wiped away, yet still speaking to us across the ages. Exploring these underwater ruins also challenges the way we think about history itself. Traditional timelines focus on the rise of civilizations we know: the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Harappans, but the evidence beneath the sea suggests that these may not have been humanity's first great societies. There may have been others, older and more advanced, whose stories were drowned and whose accomplishments have been hidden beneath layers of sediment, sand, and water. The idea is both humbling and exhilarating. It forces us to consider that human history is not linear, that civilizations rise and fall, sometimes leaving only whispers behind. As divers glide through the depths, illuminating walls and platforms with flickering lights, one can almost feel the pulse of a lost world. It is as if the waters themselves hold memory, preserving in stone and sand the echoes of human ambition and creativity. The mystery of these cities beneath the sea reminds us that our planet is alive with history, much of it hidden from view, waiting for those who dare to search beyond the surface. Each discovery, each submerged ruin, is a key, a potential clue that could unlock secrets of a civilization erased by cataclysm, yet immortalized in myth and memory. The waters that cover these lost cities are not merely barriers. They are guardians of secrets. To explore them is to confront the unknown, to step into a world where human achievement meets the raw power of nature. And as we continue our journey, tracing the contours of these sunken landscapes, we begin to realize something extraordinary. The flood myths may not be just stories, and history may not be as complete as we think. Beneath the waves lies a record of human ingenuity, tragedy, and survival, a record that beckons us to listen, to investigate, and to imagine a world that once existed long before our own. Imagine a world before the first written records, before Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley emerged as the pinnacles of early civilization. It is a world lost to the tides, erased by floods so vast and sudden that the memory of entire societies was reduced to whispers and myth. Yet if we peer carefully at the fragments left behind, the submerged ruins, mysterious artifacts, and the extraordinary precision of megalithic structures, we begin to glimpse the outlines of civilizations that might have existed long before the history we think we know. These were not primitive societies struggling for survival. They may have been sophisticated, technologically capable, and culturally rich, their knowledge erased almost entirely by forces beyond human control. Consider the scale of engineering required to build the submerged city of Dvarka, or the enigmatic terraces and steps of Yanaguni. These sites hint at a level of planning and expertise we typically associate with civilizations that came thousands of years later. If these are remnants of human ingenuity, then our current understanding of history is incomplete. We assume that humanity progressed linearly from small, scattered hunter-gatherer bands to the complex societies of the Bronze Age. But the evidence of advanced pre-flood settlements suggests another possibility, that civilization may have arisen, achieved astonishing sophistication, and then vanished in a matter of days, leaving only faint traces of its existence. What might these lost civilizations have looked like? We can imagine bustling cities with broad streets, towering structures, and advanced water management systems designed to withstand seasonal flooding or even earthquakes. Temples and observatories might have been aligned with the stars, demonstrating an understanding of astronomy far beyond what we usually attribute to early societies. Art and sculpture, perhaps preserved underwater or in hidden caves, would reflect a culture capable of aesthetic as well as technological mastery. The sudden destruction of such a world by rising seas or catastrophic floods could explain why so little evidence survives. The knowledge of entire populations swept away before it could be recorded in ways we recognize today. Artifacts that challenge conventional timelines also suggest that pre-flood civilizations may have been more advanced than previously imagined. Precision-cut stones, tools made of materials not native to their locations, and symbols etched into megaliths hint at sophisticated knowledge of engineering, metallurgy, and possibly even early mathematics. Some researchers have pointed to anomalies, such as out-of-place objects and advanced carvings, as evidence that humans were capable of remarkable feats long before the Bronze Age. If these artifacts are indeed remnants of pre-flood societies, they force us to reconsider everything we think we know about the origins of human ingenuity. The myths that survive may carry more truth than we realize. In many flood legends, survivors are tasked with carrying knowledge, culture, and the seeds of a new civilization. Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, preserves life and wisdom aboard his vessel. Noah safeguards species and moral instruction. Deucalion and Pyrrha receive guidance to repopulate the world. These narratives suggest that those who survived the flood were not merely lucky. They were custodians of knowledge, ensuring that fragments of their advanced world would survive to seed future civilizations. Could it be that our earliest known societies were simply inheritors of wisdom from a world now lost beneath the waves? Beyond myth, there are physical hints that pre-flood civilizations may have spread widely across the globe. Underwater explorations have uncovered aligned stone structures off the coasts of India, Japan, and Central America. In each case, the precision and layout of these sites imply planning and knowledge of geometry that is strikingly advanced. Similar patterns emerge in terrestrial megalithic sites such as Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, and Puma Punku, where massive stones are cut and placed with incredible precision. Could these scattered remnants be the echoes of a single, widespread civilization, or perhaps a network of societies that shared technology, culture, and knowledge before being destroyed by cataclysmic floods? The implications extend beyond architecture and engineering. An advanced pre-flood civilization may have had knowledge of agriculture, irrigation, and trade networks far more sophisticated than previously imagined. Pottery, tools, and early inscriptions hint at the possibility of record-keeping, communication, and organized governance. If such systems existed, their sudden erasure would explain the gaps in our historical record. The thousands of years we assume were primitive may instead represent the slow rebuilding of human knowledge after a near-total collapse. History, as we know it, may be a second chapter, a world built upon the fragments salvaged from a far older, lost civilization. Even the geography of these lost civilizations supports the idea of sophistication. Submerged cities often lie near former river deltas, coastal plains, or fertile valleys, regions ideal for agriculture and trade. This suggests that pre-flood societies may have thrived not only culturally and technologically, but economically. The scale of their construction and the coordination required to build monumental structures indicate a population capable of organization, planning, and collaboration on a level that rivals or surpasses what we associate with the first known civilizations. Yet, we must also consider the fragility of such achievements. Advanced knowledge, sophisticated culture, and thriving communities are all vulnerable to sudden environmental catastrophe. Rising seas, glacial melts, and mega tsunamis could obliterate everything in a matter of days, leaving only myths, oral traditions, and submerged stone remnants behind. This perspective transforms our understanding of history from a linear progression to a cyclical pattern. Civilizations rise, reach great heights, and are sometimes extinguished, only for survivors to rebuild from the fragments. In this light, the flood myths become not just allegory, but cautionary record, preserving the memory of societies erased by nature itself. The evidence that remains invites both wonder and humility. We are confronted with the possibility that our ancestors were not the first to innovate, to explore, and to create. There may have been humans before us who achieved mastery over their environment, who studied the stars, built monumental cities, and developed culture and art, only to have it vanish in the wake of floods so vast and sudden that all traces of their civilization were lost. The myths, the submerged ruins, and the anomalies in archaeology together form a tantalizing pattern. A civilization before ours, wiped clean by water, yet whispering across millennia through stories and stones. As we ponder these lost civilizations, we begin to see the past not as a straight line, but as a mosaic of rise and fall, of knowledge preserved and destroyed, of stories that survive against all odds. The human story, it seems, is far more complex than the textbooks reveal. It is a story of resilience, of catastrophe, and of mystery, inviting us to look beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, to uncover what has been hidden for countless generations. And as we continue our journey, moving from myths and submerged ruins to the suppression of knowledge and the secrets hidden in ancient texts, we begin to realize that the civilization lost to the flood may not be gone entirely. Its echoes survive, waiting for those willing to listen, imagine, and explore the waters of time. History is written by the victors, by those who survive to record their version of events. But what happens when entire civilizations vanish, swept away by floods or other cataclysmic forces? Their voices are silenced, their knowledge buried, and their achievements erased from the annals of time. This is the paradox of history. While some stories are preserved in texts, monuments, and artifacts, others are deliberately forgotten, ignored, or misinterpreted. The idea of a civilization predating recorded history is not just a curiosity. It is a challenge to the very foundation of what we consider truth. How many times has humanity built, achieved, and innovated only to have the record of it lost, suppressed, or dismissed by those who followed? The erasure of knowledge is not always accidental. Across history, powerful institutions have often shaped the narrative to fit cultural, religious, or political agendas. Texts that might contradict accepted timelines are edited, destroyed, or kept hidden. Consider the destruction of the Library of Alexandria, one of the most infamous examples of human knowledge deliberately obliterated. Scholars estimate that countless works, potentially containing records of older civilizations, advanced technology, and lost wisdom, were lost forever in those fires. What we know today is but a fraction of what humanity once recorded, leaving immense gaps in our understanding of the past. Religious influence has played a particularly complex role in shaping historical narratives. In many traditions, creation myths, flood stories, and the rise of known civilizations are framed in ways that support theological doctrines. Stories of previous advanced societies, whose knowledge might rival or surpass later civilizations, are often cast as legends or warnings of divine wrath rather than factual history. By reducing these accounts to allegory, societies have, intentionally or unintentionally, erased the tangible evidence of what came before. This selective preservation of history has reinforced the notion that humanity's first civilizations were those recognized by mainstream archaeology, even if evidence of older, sophisticated societies exists just out of reach, submerged in oceans, buried under sediment, or locked away in obscure artifacts. Even within academia, the desire to fit discoveries into a linear, chronological framework can obscure evidence that does not conform. Archaeologists, geologists, and historians often face immense pressure to interpret findings within accepted timelines. Structures, artifacts, or settlements that predate known civilizations are frequently categorized as anomalies or natural formations rather than evidence of pre-flood societies. This creates a paradoxical system where evidence may exist but is ignored because it challenges the established story. In this way, the past is curated, not purely discovered, and the possibility of advanced civilizations existing before known history is quietly pushed to the margins of scholarly inquiry. There are also tantalizing hints in the records that survive. Some ancient texts, hidden manuscripts, and esoteric writings hint at a world older than mainstream timelines acknowledge. References to antediluvian civilizations, people who walked the earth before the flood, appear across cultures, from Mesopotamian king lists to obscure manuscripts in monasteries. While many dismiss these as myth or legend, the consistency of these references, combined with archaeological anomalies, suggests that fragments of memory were deliberately preserved, albeit in coded or symbolic form. The knowledge was not lost entirely. It was obscured, waiting for future generations to decipher its meaning. Suppression of ancient knowledge may also have practical explanations. Throughout history, ruling powers have sought to maintain control by controlling information. Knowledge is power, and understanding that advanced civilizations existed long before those recognized by mainstream history could undermine accepted hierarchies, religious doctrines, or political authority. By framing pre-flood societies as myth, ignorance, or superstition, dominant cultures could suppress the threat posed by ancient wisdom. In this sense, the erasure of pre-flood civilizations was not only an accident of nature, but a conscious act of control, shaping humanity's understanding of itself for millennia. Yet despite these efforts, fragments of lost knowledge persist. Submerged ruins, anomalous artifacts, and ancient maps challenge the narrative, hinting at a sophistication that predates the recognized civilizations of history. The presence of advanced urban planning, complex metallurgy, and astronomical knowledge in sites such as Dvarka, Yanaguni, and other submerged locations suggest that humanity may have achieved remarkable feats before conventional timelines allow. These remnants, often dismissed or overlooked, carry the faint echoes of a civilization whose memory mainstream history has struggled to reconcile. There's also the fascinating role of myth and oral tradition in preserving what written records could not. While texts may be lost or destroyed, stories persist, carried across generations in song, ritual, and legend. Flood myths, creation stories, and tales of ancient kings often encode fragments of real historical events and societal knowledge. These stories survive because they were adaptable, told and retold in ways that kept them relevant, even as their literal meaning was obscured. In this sense, myth itself becomes a repository of suppressed knowledge, a bridge between the lost world and our own. The suppression of ancient knowledge also raises philosophical questions about our relationship to history. Are we limited by what we are allowed to know? How much of the past has been buried intentionally or simply forgotten? If a pre-flood civilization existed, with advanced technology, urban centers, and cultural achievements, what does that imply about humanity's potential and our own fragility? By considering the possibility that history has been shaped not only by events, but by deliberate curation, we open the door to a more expansive understanding of what the world once was and what might still be hidden. Ultimately, the story of suppressed knowledge is intertwined with the story of the flood itself. The Great Cataclysm may have erased civilizations physically, but human memory, curiosity, and storytelling ensured that fragments survived. The challenge for us is to read between the lines, to interpret the signs left in ruins, myths, and scattered artifacts, and to recognize that the history we take for granted may be incomplete. Beneath the surface, both literally and metaphorically, lies a record of humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and the civilizations we have almost forgotten. As we prepare to delve further into the evidence encoded in ancient texts, maps, and prophecies, we must keep in mind the delicate balance between memory and erasure. The story of pre-flood civilizations is not merely a tale of destruction. It is also a tale of survival, secrecy, and the extraordinary lengths to which knowledge can endure. Even when submerged beneath oceans, hidden in sediment, or obscured by dominant narratives, these traces endure, waiting for those who are willing to question, explore, and uncover the truths buried by time itself. Throughout human history, sacred texts have served as more than mere repositories of religious doctrine. They are mirrors reflecting the fears, hopes, and memories of the societies that created them. Within these texts, carefully veiled in metaphor and allegory, lie traces of a world long forgotten, fragments of knowledge that hint at civilizations lost to cataclysmic floods. From the hymns of Sumer to the scriptures of the Hebrews, from obscure esoteric manuscripts to ancient philosophical treatises, these writings preserve stories that refuse to be forgotten, whispering across millennia about the forces that shaped the world before our recorded history. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest recorded stories, contains strikingly detailed accounts of a great flood. Utnapishtim is warned by the gods of a cataclysm that will destroy humanity and instructed to build a massive vessel capable of saving life. The narrative does not merely describe a storm or a river's overflow. It depicts a flood of unprecedented scale, with precise dimensions and instructions, suggesting the transmission of practical knowledge alongside moral or spiritual lessons. Some scholars argue that these details are allegorical, yet the specificity hints at memory of events, methods, and knowledge from a civilization that existed long before the Sumerians documented it. In the biblical texts, the story of Noah's Ark carries similar themes. Beyond the moral and theological dimensions, the account preserves technical instructions for survival, measurements, materials, and procedures for safeguarding life. The repetition of this motif across multiple cultures, from Mesopotamia to Greece, raises a profound question. Why would such a story, so consistent in its outline, recur so widely if it were purely fictional? It is possible, perhaps even likely, that these sacred texts are not merely spiritual guides, but repositories of ancient memory, preserving knowledge of a world submerged by floods that reshaped the earth. Some sacred texts take a more cryptic approach, embedding knowledge in symbolism and allegory. The Hindu Puranas, for example, describes cycles of creation and destruction, with entire worlds destroyed by floods and rebuilt from survivors. The survivors carry knowledge, sacred wisdom, and cultural practices into the new age, ensuring continuity despite catastrophe. Similarly, in Egyptian mythology, the god Nun represents primordial waters, symbolizing both chaos and potential creation, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of water's destructive and regenerative power. These narratives are not simply tales of divine punishment. They encode memories of natural cataclysms and the human response to them. Beyond myths and parables, some texts hint at technologies and methods that surpass what we usually attribute to early civilizations. References to advanced construction techniques, astronomical observations, and even the preservation of life appear in subtle ways. In many cases, these references are obscured, couched in poetic or symbolic language, making them difficult to interpret. Yet the persistence of such knowledge across widely separated cultures is striking. It suggests that pre-flood civilizations, if they existed, may have left behind encoded instructions for survival and understanding, hidden within the texts that survived the cataclysms. Prophetic texts also offer tantalizing clues. Some esoteric writings speak of ancient civilizations destroyed by floods, warning future generations of repeating cycles of destruction. These prophecies are rarely straightforward. They employ allegory, metaphor, and numerology, requiring careful interpretation. Yet, the underlying message is consistent. Humanity is fragile. The forces of nature are immense, and the memory of civilization lost to water endures as both caution and instruction. Could these prophecies be the echoes of first-hand knowledge, encoded for survival in a world that would forget the original events? Interestingly, some of the most compelling evidence comes from texts that have survived against tremendous odds. Manuscripts hidden in monasteries, scrolls preserved in desert climates, and oral traditions that were eventually written down often contain details that challenge mainstream history. For example, certain ancient king lists, combined with references to advanced societies and pre-flood events, suggest that human civilization has roots far deeper than conventional archaeology admits. These texts, once carefully read in context and compared across cultures, reveal a striking pattern. The memory of floods, advanced knowledge, and sophisticated societies predating the civilizations we think of as the first. The challenge lies in interpretation. Ancient scribes often wrote symbolically, and sacred texts are layered with multiple meanings: historical, spiritual, moral, and practical. To the casual reader, these stories may appear fantastical, but a careful examination reveals threads of information about floods, survival, and human ingenuity. The consistency of these threads across cultures, continents, and millennia is difficult to dismiss. It is as though the scribes, knowingly or unknowingly, preserved fragments of a civilization that history had almost forgotten. There are also fascinating connections between texts and archaeology. References to cities, rivers, and landscapes in sacred writings sometimes correspond to submerged ruins or anomalies found by modern science. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Bible, and the Hindu Puranas describe waters consuming civilizations, and today we find ruins beneath seas and lakes in locations described by these texts. The convergence of myth, scripture, and physical evidence suggests that sacred texts may indeed be more than stories. They are maps of memory, guiding us toward understanding the civilizations that existed before the flood. Ultimately, these sacred texts invite us to consider a radical possibility: that knowledge, once thought lost, has endured through allegory, symbolism, and spiritual instruction. They challenge the assumption that human civilization began with the Sumerians, urging us instead to look deeper, to interpret stories not merely as moral lessons, but as records of events, technologies, and societies now almost entirely erased. In doing so, they provide a bridge between myth and reality, between the known and the unknown, offering tantalizing hints of a world older, more advanced, and more mysterious than our textbooks allow. As we move forward in our exploration, examining ancient maps, megalithic structures, and artifacts, the sacred texts serve as both guide and warning. They remind us that history is not linear, that civilizations rise and fall, and that knowledge can survive even the greatest cataclysms. If only we are willing to read the stories carefully, to listen between the lines, and to acknowledge the possibility that humanity once walked a far older and far more advanced path than we have been taught to believe. Maps are more than tools for navigation. They are windows into the minds of those who created them, reflections of geography, knowledge, and imagination. Yet some maps, preserved through the centuries, hint at coastlines, lands, and cities that no longer exist. They challenge our understanding of human history, suggesting that civilizations once thrived in regions now submerged beneath oceans or seas. These ancient cartographic anomalies may hold the key to understanding the world that existed before the Great Flood, a world whose memory survives not just in myths and texts, but in the meticulous sketches and measurements of early mapmakers. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer, is perhaps the most famous example. On its fragile parchment, Piri Reis depicted the coasts of South America and Africa with astonishing accuracy. Yet what has captivated researchers for decades is the depiction of a southern continent that corresponds to Antarctica, long before its official discovery, and the coastlines appear free of ice. How could a 16th century mapmaker have produced such precise details for lands that were officially unknown at the time? One explanation is that Piri Reis had access to older sources, maps passed down through generations, possibly originating from civilizations that existed before the flood, when coastlines were dramatically different. The map itself becomes a tantalizing clue, a relic of knowledge inherited from a world erased by water. Similarly, the ancient Babylonian and Egyptian maps suggest an awareness of lands and waterways that challenge conventional history. Some depict rivers, mountain ranges, and islands with such precision that it seems unlikely they were drawn purely from imagination or hearsay. Could these maps be echoing a memory of a pre-flood geography, preserved across centuries by those who survived and recorded what they knew? The possibility is both thrilling and unsettling. The maps may contain encoded knowledge of coastlines now lost, cities now submerged, and civilizations whose existence was almost entirely erased by the rising waters. Even the European portolan charts of the medieval period hint at a world built on older knowledge. While they primarily serve navigation, many of these maps include coastlines and islands that do not correspond to modern geography, often accompanied by notes in obscure languages or symbols that remain difficult to interpret. Some researchers argue that these charts are based on oral reports or lost documents originating from ancient mariners who had access to pre-flood knowledge, passed down in secret to avoid it being lost again. If this is the case, then our understanding of history is missing entire chapters preserved only in ink on fragile parchment and carefully guarded manuscripts. The possibility that pre-flood civilizations created maps is supported by archaeological and geological evidence. Submerged ruins off coastlines in the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, and the Mediterranean suggest that areas now underwater were once inhabited. River valleys that extend far beyond current coastlines hint at settlements abandoned as waters rose. If civilizations existed in these regions, it stands to reason they would have charted their world, creating maps that preserve knowledge of land, water, and resources. Over millennia, as floodwaters claimed these regions, the maps survived only in copies, preserved through successive generations, hidden in libraries, monasteries, and private collections. Some maps also depict architectural and urban layouts, suggesting knowledge of cities that no longer exist. The inclusion of harbors, roads, and structures implies that these maps were not merely symbolic or navigational. They were records of a living, functioning world. When we compare these depictions with submerged sites such as Dvarka in India, Yonaguni in Japan, and various locations in the Caribbean and Mediterranean, the alignment between map and reality becomes striking. The maps, then, are more than guides. They are historical evidence, encoded and transmitted across generations, of civilizations erased by cataclysmic floods. The precision of some ancient maps challenges the assumption that pre-modern humans were incapable of advanced observation or recording. These maps suggest a knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and geography that aligns with sophisticated urban planning and engineering found in submerged ruins. Mariners may have tracked coastlines, rivers, and celestial movements to produce maps of astonishing accuracy. If these skills existed thousands of years ago, it reinforces the possibility that advanced societies existed long before the recognized first civilizations, and that the flood myths are more than allegory. They are records of a historical catastrophe that reshaped human settlement patterns. Maps also hint at the transmission of knowledge across cultures. Pyri Reis's map incorporated information from Arabic, Greek, and possibly pre-flood sources. Similarly, medieval European charts may have drawn on ancient Mesopotamian, Egyptian, or even lost Atlantean knowledge. The repetition of similar coastlines, island formations, and geographical features across disparate sources suggests a continuity of memory, a lineage of cartographic knowledge that survived floods, wars, and the passage of millennia. In this light, maps become not just practical tools, but vessels of memory, carrying information about civilizations we have otherwise forgotten. The convergence of myth, submerged ruins, and cartographic evidence paints an extraordinary picture. It suggests a world in which humans achieved significant cultural, technological, and geographic understanding long before the rise of historically recognized civilizations. Floods may have erased cities, settlements, and entire populations, but the knowledge of those civilizations survived in maps, texts, myths, and oral tradition. Each artifact, each chart, and each submerged structure is a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, hints at a pre-flood world of astonishing sophistication. Ultimately, these ancient maps compel us to reconsider our assumptions about human history. They challenge the narrative of a linear progression from primitive hunter-gatherers to advanced civilizations. Instead, They suggest that humanity may have experienced an earlier golden age, one that was abruptly ended by cataclysmic floods. The knowledge preserved in maps, though fragmented and often misunderstood, offers a tantalizing glimpse into that lost world, a civilization submerged beneath oceans yet alive in memory, waiting to be rediscovered. As we examine these maps alongside myths, texts, and submerged ruins, a pattern emerges. The Great Flood, long dismissed as allegory, may have been the event that erased human history on a global scale. Yet even in destruction, remnants survived, encoded in the stories, stones, and charts that endure. The maps serve as bridges across time, guiding us to imagine a world before the flood, a world of knowledge, culture, and achievement lost to water, yet whispering across centuries to those willing to see beyond the surface. Artifacts are the silent witnesses of history, tangible fragments of lives once lived, knowledge once possessed, and societies once thriving. In the context of pre-flood civilizations, these artifacts are even more remarkable because they hint at levels of technological and cultural sophistication that challenge the conventional understanding of humanity's early history. From precisely cut stones and advanced tools to mysterious objects that defy explanation, the remnants of these civilizations suggest that humans may have achieved extraordinary feats long before the first civilizations we are taught to recognize. Each artifact is a clue, a whisper from a world that history almost entirely erased. Consider the megalithic structures found in various locations around the globe. Sites such as Puma Punku in Bolivia, Baalbek in Lebanon, and the submerged terraces of Yonaguni display craftsmanship that is astonishing even by modern standards. Stones weighing hundreds of tons were cut with such precision that even contemporary machinery would struggle to replicate the work. Some stones fit together so perfectly that no mortar was necessary, and their edges are so smooth that they could not have been shaped with simple tools alone. The level of engineering knowledge required to quarry, transport, and fit these stones suggests a civilization with advanced understanding of physics, geometry, and material science, skills far beyond what conventional timelines attribute to humanity at the time. Then there are the artifacts themselves, tools, implements, and objects that hint at a technological sophistication erased by floodwaters and centuries of neglect. Copper, bronze, and even iron objects have been found in contexts that predate the conventional emergence of metallurgy. Intricate carvings, precision-cut stone spheres, and metallic implements suggest a mastery of crafting techniques that may have been lost in the cataclysm. The very existence of these objects forces us to reconsider the idea that early humans were primitive or incapable of complex construction, artistry, and technology. One particularly intriguing category of artifacts is the so-called out-of-place objects. These include tools, carvings, and relics found in geological layers far older than mainstream science considers possible for human activity. A hammer encased in stone, intricately carved figurines, and artifacts embedded in rock layers suggest human activity at times when, according to conventional archaeology, humanity had not yet developed the necessary skills. Skeptics argue that such objects are hoaxes or misinterpretations. Yet when examined critically alongside submerged ruins, ancient maps, and mythological accounts, a different story begins to emerge. A story of humans with knowledge and capability far older than commonly acknowledged. The geographical spread of these artifacts is equally striking. From the Americas to Asia, Africa, and Europe, artifacts suggest a pattern of advanced human activity that aligns with the evidence of submerged cities and altered coastlines. The consistency of these findings across continents implies not isolated pockets of innovation, but a global network of human ingenuity and culture, all potentially erased or submerged during the cataclysmic floods remembered in myth. The flood may have been nature's reset button, obliterating civilizations almost entirely, yet leaving behind artifacts that continue to speak across millennia. Beyond their physical characteristics, many artifacts hint at cultural and intellectual sophistication. Carvings depicting astronomical bodies, celestial alignments, and complex mathematical patterns indicate knowledge of the cosmos that is surprising for such early periods. These objects suggest that pre-flood civilizations were not only technologically advanced, but also intellectually curious, observing the skies, understanding cycles, and possibly integrating this knowledge into urban planning, agriculture, and religious practice. The precision in these carvings mirrors the precision found in submerged city layouts and ancient maps, reinforcing the idea of a civilization that understood both the terrestrial and celestial worlds in ways that modern scholars often underestimate. Even small artifacts, such as beads, pottery shards, and ritual objects, reveal layers of sophistication. The materials, crafting techniques, and decorative motifs point to a high degree of specialization and artistic development. Communities capable of producing such items must have had organization, division of labor, and cultural complexity far beyond what is typically associated with early human societies. These are not the products of scattered nomadic bands, but of settled populations with social structures, knowledge transmission, and perhaps even literacy or symbolic communication. Artifacts also offer hints at technologies that may have been lost entirely. Some objects suggest an understanding of principles that would not reappear in known human history for thousands of years. Mechanisms, polished metals, and engineering tools buried beneath sediments or submerged beneath seas challenge assumptions about the linear progression of technological development. If pre-flood civilizations had mastered such skills, the sudden disappearance of these societies explains why these advancements seemingly vanished from the historical record, only to be rediscovered much later in fragments scattered across the globe. The relationship between artifacts and myth is particularly compelling. Many objects appear to corroborate stories preserved in flood legends, suggesting that myths were not purely symbolic, but also records of real events and societies. Tools and artifacts found in areas now underwater, aligned with descriptions in ancient texts, imply a continuity between memory and material evidence. The flood myths, long dismissed as allegory, may in fact encode historical reality, while artifacts serve as tangible proof of what these myths describe. Ultimately, the artifacts of pre-flood civilizations demand a reevaluation of history. They tell a story of human achievement, ingenuity, and resilience, of societies that built, created, and explored, only to be swept away by forces beyond their control. Yet even in destruction, their legacy endures, encoded in stone, metal, and clay, whispering across time. They remind us that history is not merely a linear progression from primitive to advanced, but a complex tapestry of rise, fall, and rediscovery, challenging our assumptions and inviting us to imagine the lost worlds that came before us. These artifacts, when considered alongside submerged ruins, ancient maps, sacred texts, and myths, paint a picture of a pre-flood world far more advanced than we have been taught to believe. Each object is a clue, each carving a message, each construction a testament to knowledge almost entirely erased. They beckon us to question the timeline of civilization, to explore beneath the surface of history, and to acknowledge the possibility that humanity's story began not with the first recognized civilizations, but with societies that thrived, perished, and left behind a whisper of their greatness for us to uncover. The story of floods in human history is not merely a tale of water rising and land disappearing. It is in many ways the story of erasure, of civilizations being wiped from memory, leaving only whispers in myths, legends, and the fragments of material culture that managed to survive. Consider the scale of such a catastrophe. Imagine a world where entire cities thrived on fertile coastal plains, bustling with trade, innovation, and knowledge, their populations numbering in the tens of thousands or more. And then, almost overnight in geological terms, a force far greater than anything they had experienced surged across their lands, inundating fields, homes, and temples alike. The waters would have not only swallowed physical structures, but erased entire ways of life, cultures, and accumulated knowledge, leaving future generations to piece together a fragmented, incomplete picture of their past. From a geological perspective, there are several mechanisms capable of producing such catastrophic floods. The melting of vast glaciers at the end of the last ice age, for example, unleashed unimaginable volumes of water, reshaping coastlines and transforming rivers and lakes in ways that today still puzzle scientists. Entire river systems, like the ancient Sarasvati in India or the flooded basins of the North Sea, hint at former worlds now lost beneath water. Earthquakes and tectonic activity could have further amplified these events, displacing enormous amounts of water in sudden, violent surges. Even meteor impacts, though rare, would have triggered colossal tsunamis, capable of erasing settlements along thousands of kilometers of coastline. These natural cataclysms did not occur in isolation. Often, they acted in cycles, a relentless reminder of the fragile relationship between human societies and the forces of the planet itself. But the flood's true power was not just physical. It was cultural and psychological. When a civilization is drowned, its history is often rewritten by survivors or those who rise after the waters recede. Imagine the trauma of the few who lived through such an event, tasked with telling a story so overwhelming that it strains the capacity of memory itself. Oral traditions, passed down for generations, often morph into allegories, parables, or myth. This is why we encounter so many flood legends across the globe, each culture echoing the same memory of a world reset by water, yet each shaping the story in its own symbolic way. The destruction of records, libraries, and monuments ensured that much of the knowledge gained over centuries vanished almost entirely. Mathematical calculations, architectural methods, medical practices, and perhaps even astronomical observations could have been lost in a single, devastating event. The cyclical nature of floods also suggests a broader perspective. Perhaps these events were not anomalies, but recurring resets in human history. Each cycle may have extinguished the remnants of older civilizations, leaving new populations to start afresh, unaware of the advanced societies that had preceded them. This perspective reframes human progress not as a steady march forward, but as a fragile flame repeatedly rekindled after catastrophic darkness. It also introduces a chilling implication. If floods erase civilizations in the past, could future cycles threaten the civilizations of today? The thought alone underscores the precariousness of human knowledge, reminding us that much of what we take for granted as progress rests on a thin veneer of continuity. Archaeological discoveries lend some weight to these speculations. Submerged cities, coastal ruins, and ancient harbors now beneath the waves hint at sophisticated societies suddenly abandoned or destroyed by rising waters. Some sites, like the sunken ruins off the coast of India or the Mediterranean, reveal intricate layouts, evidence of trade networks, and monumental architecture. These remnants suggest that societies capable of remarkable feats of engineering and culture existed long before the history we are taught in textbooks. In some cases, layers of sediment burying these structures speak to sudden inundation rather than slow erosion, as if the waters themselves rose with little warning, giving inhabitants no time to evacuate or preserve their legacies. Yet, while floods erased civilizations, they also shaped the survivors. Those who emerged after the waters receded were forced to rebuild, often on higher ground, with limited resources and fragmented knowledge. Their new societies retained fragments of the past, encoded in myths, religious practices, and even in the remnants of megalithic structures that survived the deluge. In this sense, floods functioned both as destroyers and as teachers, reshaping human culture, belief systems, and social structures in profound ways. In reflecting on the history of catastrophic floods, one begins to see them not as isolated disasters, but as fundamental forces in shaping human civilization. They erased entire worlds, reshuffled societies, and in some ways, acted as the ultimate arbiters of human memory and culture. The concept of the flood as a reset mechanism reframes history itself. The civilizations we study may only be the latest in a long line of societies that rose and fell, leaving behind tantalizing hints of greater worlds that existed before recorded time. These hints whisper to us from beneath the waves, challenging our assumptions and daring us to imagine what knowledge, art, and wisdom were lost forever to the waters. And so, as we peer into the murky depths of our planet's watery past, we begin to understand the flood not just as an event, but as a phenomenon with the power to erase, reset, and transform, a force that shaped the destiny of humanity long before our history books began. It is within this context that we must confront the possibility. The world we know today may be just one chapter in a story that has been written, erased, and rewritten countless times beneath the silent, indifferent tides of the oceans. Even as the waters of great floods receded, traces of the past persisted, not in stone or city, but in memory, in story, and in the quiet persistence of human culture. Across continents, cultures, and millennia, the survivors of cataclysmic inundations carried with them fragments of a world now lost beneath waves. These fragments often took the form of myths, legends, and oral traditions, tales that spoke of a golden age before the deluge, of knowledge and wisdom lost, of ancestors who walked the earth with powers and understanding that modern humans could scarcely imagine. In these stories, one begins to sense that the flood was not merely a natural disaster, but a profound rupture in human consciousness, a severing of the link between past and present. Consider the tale of Noah, who, according to the biblical account, preserved life itself in a great ark. Across the world, strikingly similar stories emerge. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim, warned by the gods of a coming flood and instructed to build a vessel to save humanity and the seeds of civilization. In India, Manu receives a divine warning, preserving humanity from waters that would otherwise wipe the earth clean. Indigenous legends throughout the Americas speak of ancestral survivors who escaped the rising waters in canoes or atop mountains, carrying knowledge and culture forward into new societies. These stories share not just a narrative pattern, but a psychological resonance. The flood is both destruction and salvation, punishment and preservation, erasing some things entirely while sparing others, as if the earth itself were a living historian, choosing what to remember and what to forget. The power of these narratives lies not merely in their survival, but in their detail. They speak of rising waters covering mountains, of rain falling for days and nights without pause, of humanity forced to confront the fragility of its own existence. And yet, amidst the devastation, the tales often preserve hints of the world before the flood. The locations of sacred cities, the existence of advanced knowledge, the presence of powerful rulers or sages who shaped the course of human destiny. These echoes suggest that the survivors were not merely recounting events. They were preserving fragments of a lost civilization, encoded in story to survive where architecture, texts, and artifacts could not. Anthropologists and mythologists have long marveled at the similarities between these flood legends, noting how consistent motifs appear across geographically and temporally isolated cultures. Could these recurring themes reflect a shared memory of a historical event so catastrophic that it left an indelible mark on the human psyche? Or perhaps they hint at an underlying truth about the cycles of human civilization, warning us that history is not a linear march forward, but a series of rises and collapses, each recorded imperfectly in the minds of those who survive. Some of the most fascinating evidence comes not from texts, but from cultural practices and ritual. In many societies, ceremonies revolve around water, floods, or renewal, often timed with natural seasonal cycles. Consider the ancient Mesopotamian rituals that reenacted the flood, or the ceremonial stories told by Native American tribes, where water plays a central role in creation and survival myths. These rituals may serve as living memory, a way of encoding survival strategies, moral lessons, and knowledge about the past in ways that transcend written records. In this sense, the survivors of the flood were not merely witnesses. They became custodians of memory, carrying forward a bridge between the lost world and the one that emerged from the waters. Yet these survivor legends do more than preserve memory. They also illuminate human resilience. While floods erased cities and knowledge, they could not destroy the human instinct to adapt, to rebuild, to carry forward the lessons learned from catastrophe. Across the world, we find settlements rebuilt on higher ground, new societies rising from the ruins of old ones, often blending what they remembered with what they could rediscover. Language, art, religion, and technology evolved through these cycles, showing not just continuity, but transformation. The survivors were not passive victims. They were active participants in shaping the course of history, preserving what they could, reconstructing what was lost, and embedding cautionary tales into the cultural DNA of their descendants. These stories also challenge the way we view progress. When we assume that human civilization developed in a straightforward, unbroken line, we ignore the likelihood that much of what we now consider ancient may itself be a reconstruction atop layers of prior, forgotten cultures. The survivor legends, therefore, act as a key, hinting at worlds that preceded those recorded in mainstream history. They suggest that humanity has endured cycles of loss and renewal far beyond what textbooks admit, and that beneath every legend lies the faint pulse of a civilization drowned, yet never entirely extinguished. And so, as we listen to these survivor legends, we begin to sense the scale of what has been lost, but also the remarkable perseverance of human memory. Through story, ritual, and cultural transmission, fragments of an advanced, pre-flood civilization may have survived, shaping our myths, guiding our morals, and influencing the architecture of human thought for generations. The flood may have been a reset, but the survivors ensured that humanity carried forward not only its genes, but also its collective memory, a whispered inheritance, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who would seek it across the tides of time. Long after the waters of the great floods receded, the question remained, could a civilization advanced beyond what we imagine have existed, only to be erased so completely that its very memory lies buried beneath layers of earth and sediment? Modern science has begun to glimpse traces of such possibilities, as underwater archaeology, satellite imaging, and geological studies reveal strange anomalies beneath the oceans and along coastlines where ancient civilizations may once have flourished. Submerged structures, sunken harbors, and city grids discovered off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean hint at human ingenuity far older than conventional history admits. These discoveries are tantalizing, offering glimpses of societies that thrived in harmony with the land and water, only to vanish as tides and time conspired to erase them from the surface of the earth. The science of memory in this context is not metaphorical, it is literal. Sedimentary layers, mineral deposits, and fossilized remains act as an archive, holding in place a record of what once existed. In some cases, these traces are shockingly well preserved, as if the Earth itself conspired to safeguard fragments of knowledge for a distant future. Sonar scans reveal geometric patterns on the ocean floor, straight lines, rectangular foundations, and complex layouts that suggest planning, design, and communal effort. Structures that defy natural explanation, including walls and terraces built with precision stonework, hint at the presence of societies with engineering skills previously thought impossible for their era. These submerged ruins speak in silent testimony to the possibility that our human history is only a fragment of a much grander narrative. Technology has become the key to unlocking these mysteries. LiDAR, for example, has penetrated dense jungles to reveal vast complexes of structures in Central and South America, previously hidden beneath layers of vegetation. Similarly, satellite imagery can detect subtle patterns in desert landscapes, marking the outlines of ancient cities, roads, and irrigation systems. Even underwater, sonar and submersibles allow archaeologists to peer into sunken worlds, mapping them with precision. Every new discovery challenges the assumptions of mainstream history. Civilizations were far more widespread, interconnected, and advanced than previously imagined. And yet, many of these revelations remain on the periphery of public knowledge, overshadowed by the linear narrative of human progress that textbooks insist upon. Perhaps the most striking element of these submerged or hidden civilizations is the suddenness of their disappearance. Geological evidence often points to rapid inundation events, floods, tsunamis, or seismic activity, that would have left little time for populations to evacuate, let alone preserve records of their achievements. Entire harbors, palaces, and settlements were swallowed in moments, leaving only the faintest whispers behind. For scientists, these sites are puzzles, a combination of geology and archaeology that hint at a larger story still waiting to be reconstructed. For the imaginative mind, they are portals to a world lost, where humans may have mastered techniques, technologies, and knowledge that rival or surpass our own. The implications extend beyond physical evidence. Linguistic studies suggest that certain words, symbols, and myths preserved in human cultures may encode fragments of this lost knowledge. Ancient scripts, undeciphered languages, and symbolic motifs, found across continents, could be remnants of a shared memory of civilizations erased by cataclysmic floods. Some scholars propose that these cultural residues are more than coincidence. They may represent a deliberate effort to preserve knowledge in forms resilient to destruction. In this sense, memory itself becomes a vessel, carrying wisdom from one generation to the next, even when the tangible markers of civilization have been obliterated. This notion of preserved memory raises uncomfortable questions about the continuity of human knowledge. What if the timeline of human advancement is not linear, but cyclical? What if the achievements of pre-flood civilizations were far greater than anything we now acknowledge, only to be lost and reconstructed piecemeal by survivors and subsequent generations? The very idea challenges deeply ingrained assumptions about progress and human ingenuity, suggesting that what we consider modern innovation may in fact be a rediscovery of ancient wisdom. From mathematics and architecture to navigation and astronomy, the echoes of earlier civilizations might still resonate beneath our conscious awareness, hidden in myths, rituals, and the lingering ruins beneath the waves. Even more striking are instances where submerged or buried structures appear to define not just history, but logic. Sites like the ruins off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, with their sharp angles and precise terraces, or the sunken cities near Dwarka in India, raise questions that mainstream archaeology struggles to answer. How could societies millennia ago manipulate stone with such accuracy, design complex urban layouts, or construct harbors aligned with astronomical patterns without advanced tools? These questions, left largely unanswered, deepen the mystery and hint at civilizations whose capabilities far exceeded what conventional timelines allow. In the end, the science of memory, archaeological, geological, and cultural, offers both hope and frustration. It provides tantalizing glimpses of what once was, yet often stops short of delivering the full picture. What survives beneath the waves, buried in sediment or encoded in legend, reminds us that human history may be far older, more intricate, and far more fragile than we dare to imagine. Each discovery, each anomaly, each submerged ruin is a whisper from forgotten past, urging us to reconsider what we know, to question the assumptions of linear history, and to remain open to the possibility that entire civilizations, advanced beyond comprehension, once flourished, only to be erased by forces as old and indifferent as the oceans themselves. And so, as we scan the ocean floor, probe the layers of sediment, and unravel the fragments of human memory, we are faced with the haunting realization that the story of humanity is far from complete. For every city uncovered beneath the waves, for every artifact recovered from mud or stone, there lies a deeper truth. The earth remembers more than we do, preserving hints of civilizations erased by floodwaters, waiting for the patient observer to piece together what was lost, and perhaps to imagine what might yet be rediscovered. Throughout history, humanity has been captivated by the idea that certain individuals or groups possessed foresight, the ability to see beyond the veil of ordinary time and perceive patterns that others could not. Prophecies, oracular pronouncements, and esoteric teachings have appeared across cultures, often carrying cryptic warnings of great floods, cosmic upheavals, and the collapse of civilizations. At first glance, these predictions may seem allegorical or symbolic, products of imagination or superstition. But when examined alongside archaeological and geological evidence, a remarkable pattern emerges. The warnings encoded in these texts may be echoes of a collective memory, a shadow of the catastrophic events that reshaped the world and erased entire societies. Take, for example, the ancient Book of Enoch, a text long revered in mystical traditions and largely absent from mainstream religious canons. It speaks of celestial movements, fallen angels, and the deluge that transformed the earth, blending myth, astronomy, and moral instruction into a single narrative. While mainstream scholars often dismiss these writings as purely allegorical, the detailed attention to natural events, the stars, the sun, and the cycles of water, suggests an awareness of forces that shape the planet in profound ways. Could these accounts be more than moral parables? Could they be attempts by survivors of cataclysmic floods to encode knowledge of natural phenomena, guiding future generations towards survival and understanding? Similarly, the Mayan civilization, famed for its intricate calendars and astronomical observations, embedded within its glyphs and codices subtle warnings about cyclical cataclysms. The long count calendar, which fascinated the modern world during the 2012 phenomenon, is not merely a record of time, but a testament to an ancient understanding of cycles, of rise and fall, of creation and destruction. Within these cycles, the Mayans may have preserved memory of floods and natural disasters, events that reset human progress, yet left indelible marks on cultural consciousness. These patterns hint at an awareness that history is not linear, that civilizations can be wiped away in a single generation, and that knowledge itself must be safeguarded through layers of symbolism, ritual, and oral tradition. Even in European traditions, prophecies and hidden knowledge whisper of a world reshaped by waters. Nostradamus, often reduced to vague quatrains in popular imagination, wrote with attention to cycles of upheaval, natural disasters, and human hubris. Earlier, the Sibylline prophecies of Rome, cryptic and fragmented, warned of floods, fires, and celestial disturbances. In each case, the messages are veiled, demanding interpretation, suggesting that knowledge of catastrophe was not shared openly, but encoded in riddles, poetry, and ritual language. It is as if the ancients understood that the truth of past floods and lost civilizations was dangerous or profound enough to be hidden, accessible only to those attuned to its patterns. The esoteric dimension of these prophecies is equally compelling. Secret societies, mystery schools, and mystical orders often preserved fragments of what might have been advanced knowledge about floods and their consequences. The Rosicrucians, alchemists, and even certain branches of the Kabbalah encoded teachings about cycles of destruction and renewal, warning initiates that the world operates in rhythms far older than recorded history. Symbols, sacred geometries, and allegorical texts may conceal warnings about the fragility of human societies and the destructive potential of nature. Some scholars suggest that these teachings were attempts to safeguard knowledge of pre-flood civilizations, to ensure that even if history were reset, certain wisdom could survive. In examining these prophecies, a curious convergence emerges. Flood myths, celestial observations, and cyclical warnings appear not as isolated artifacts, but as threads in a vast tapestry connecting civilizations across space and time. Could it be that humanity, in some forgotten epoch, suffered events so cataclysmic that the memory of them was encoded across cultures, preserved in prophecy to guide descendants who would never witness the original disaster? The consistency of motifs, rising waters, the collapse of cities, moral tests, and the survival of the righteous or wise suggest that these were not merely coincidental stories, but rather a conscious attempt to transmit knowledge across generations. Yet the ambiguity of these prophecies is deliberate. Water, after all, is both destroyer and purifier. Floods erase, but also cleanse, resetting the world for survivors. Perhaps the cryptic nature of these warnings was necessary. They were encoded in symbolism and allegory precisely because direct knowledge could be misused, forgotten, or lost in the chaos of catastrophe. The initiates who preserved this wisdom understood that survival required more than physical preparation. It required memory, moral understanding, and the ability to interpret signs hidden in the natural and cultural world. Modern researchers often view prophecy as a cultural artifact, divorced from tangible events. But when juxtaposed with evidence of rising seas, submerged ruins, and the sudden disappearance of settlements, these ancient warnings take on a new resonance. They hint at a human civilization attuned to the cycles of nature, capable of perceiving patterns that would escape ordinary observation. They also suggest that knowledge of cataclysmic floods, and perhaps even the existence of advanced societies predating our own, may have been deliberately preserved, encoded in symbols, myths, and sacred texts, waiting for a future generation capable of decoding them. In the end, the study of prophecies and esoteric warnings reminds us that humanity has long been aware of its vulnerability, and that memory can survive even when civilization itself is erased. Floods may destroy cities, erase texts, and scatter populations, but wisdom, carefully preserved in allegory, ritual, and prophecy, endures. It is within this enduring memory, hidden beneath the surface of myth and mystery, that we may find not only warnings of the past, but clues about what may lie beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered by those who seek to understand the forgotten civilizations that once walked the earth. As we peer across the layers of history and legend, a haunting question begins to take shape. If floods reshaped the world before, if advanced civilizations were once erased by water, could the forces that once devastated humanity rise again? Modern science provides unsettling answers. Rising sea levels, melting glaciers, and shifting climate patterns all signal that the planet is in motion, that its balance is fragile, and that the same forces that reshaped coastlines and civilizations thousands of years ago are still at work today. In some ways, we are not as separated from the ancient world as we might believe. The Earth's rhythms, indifferent to human ambition, continue their cycles of destruction and renewal. Consider the evidence. Satellite studies show that polar ice is melting at unprecedented rates, sending vast amounts of fresh water into the oceans and raising sea levels year by year. Coastal cities, some built on land that has been inhabited for millennia, now teeter on the edge of inundation. Storm surges, hurricanes, and monsoons are growing in intensity, reshaping landscapes in ways eerily reminiscent of the cataclysmic events recorded in myth. Modern science, through its data and predictive models, provides a terrifyingly clear picture. The natural forces that once erased civilizations are far from dormant. They are active, evolving, and potentially capable of rewriting human history yet again. The comparison is not merely scientific, it is also philosophical. Ancient flood narratives, passed down through oral tradition and myth, can be seen as warnings encoded for future generations. The survivors of earlier cataclysms understood that humanity's knowledge is fragile, that cities and technology can vanish in moments, and that only the wisdom of memory and foresight could safeguard the future. Today, as we confront rising oceans and environmental instability, we are forced to reckon with the possibility that the warnings embedded in myths were not merely stories. They were records of real cycles, preserved as cautionary tales for a world that might one day face similar calamities. Furthermore, geological evidence reinforces this idea. Submerged ancient settlements along coastlines, remnants of harbors now beneath the waves, and erosion patterns and sediment layers all point to events that reshaped human habitation in sudden and profound ways. Even as we build our modern cities and infrastructure, we are, in many respects, repeating the patterns of ancient societies, constructing fragile human networks in proximity to powerful and unpredictable waters. The irony is stark. We rely on knowledge, technology, and engineering, yet the very forces that once wiped out civilizations remain beyond our control. History, it seems, has a way of repeating itself, whether we recognize it or not. The implications extend beyond geography and climate. If pre-flood civilizations existed and were destroyed by cataclysmic events, then the very foundations of our history may be incomplete. Technologies, knowledge, and insights from a lost world could have vanished with the rising waters, leaving modern humanity to rediscover what was once known. Every invention, every leap in engineering or navigation might be less a progression than a reinvention, a rediscovery of what had been mastered, then lost. In this light, contemporary climate crises become more than environmental challenges. They are echoes of ancient cataclysms, a reminder that human civilization is far more vulnerable than the steady march of history suggests. Some researchers even speculate that modern disasters could mirror ancient events in both scale and consequence. Mega tsunamis, triggered by underwater landslides or glacial collapses, could submerge entire coastal regions in hours. Earthquakes along tectonic fault lines, volcanic eruptions, and sudden shifts in ocean currents all carry the potential to replicate the kind of global devastation recorded in myths and legends. These are not distant possibilities. They are measurable phenomena, observable, and, in some cases, increasingly frequent. The parallels with ancient flood events are impossible to ignore, raising urgent questions about preparedness, memory, and the fragility of human knowledge. Yet amid the looming threat, there is an opportunity for reflection. The study of ancient floods, their survivors, and the legends they left behind offers more than fascination. It offers guidance. Societies that endured catastrophic deluges understood the importance of memory, foresight, and adaptability. They encoded survival strategies in myth, ritual, and oral tradition, ensuring that even when physical structures were destroyed, lessons persisted. In today's context, this becomes a metaphor as well as a practical lesson. Understanding the cycles of nature, respecting the limits of human engineering, and learning from the stories of the past can help prevent catastrophe or at least mitigate its effects. Ultimately, considering modern implications transforms the ancient flood from a distant myth into a mirror reflecting our own vulnerability. Rising seas, unstable weather patterns, and environmental degradation remind us that the Earth is a dynamic force, indifferent to human ambition, capable of erasing civilizations in ways both sudden and absolute. The myths, prophecies, and submerged ruins of the past serve not only as records of what once was, but as warnings for what could be. In connecting ancient cycles to contemporary reality, we see that history may not simply be a record of human achievement. It is also a guide, a caution, and a challenge, urging us to recognize that the lessons encoded in story, legend, and prophecy remain as urgent today as they were millennia ago. And so, as we confront the rising waters and shifting landscapes of the modern world, we are faced with a profound choice: to ignore the patterns of the past, repeating mistakes that have erased civilizations before, or to heed the silent wisdom preserved in memory, legend, and science, using it to navigate an uncertain future. In this tension between knowledge and vulnerability, humanity's resilience is tested, reminding us that while the floods may be inevitable, understanding and foresight can offer a chance at survival and continuity. The more we explore the mysteries of the past, the more the pieces begin to fit together, revealing a startling possibility: that humanity's history may be far older and more complex than conventional narratives suggest. Across continents, from sunken ruins beneath the oceans to megalithic structures in remote deserts, evidence points to the existence of civilizations whose knowledge, technology, and culture surpassed what mainstream history attributes to their era. Yet, these civilizations, if they truly existed, were erased by cataclysmic floods, leaving behind only fragments, monuments, myths, artifacts, and traces in the collective memory. The climactic revelation of this exploration is not merely that such civilizations may have existed, but that humanity's story has been deliberately obscured, hidden beneath layers of water, sediment, and cultural suppression. The submerged city ruins off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean are perhaps the most compelling evidence of this lost world. The city of Dvarka, for example, mentioned in the Mahabharata, lies beneath the Arabian Sea, revealing complex urban planning, stone constructions, and harbor systems that would have required advanced engineering and a sophisticated understanding of the natural world. Similarly, the Yanaguni underwater formation off the coast of Japan features terraces, steps, and geometric structures that defy easy explanation. While skeptics argue these are natural formations, the precision and scale of the constructions suggest human intervention. Could these ruins be remnants of an advanced pre-flood civilization, a society obliterated by forces we are only beginning to comprehend? The story becomes even more fascinating when we consider the possibility that remnants of this knowledge were deliberately preserved through myths, esoteric teachings, and secret societies. Across the globe, flood legends echo a common theme. A cataclysm wipes out the old world, yet survivors carry fragments of wisdom into the next cycle. Could it be that organizations such as the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and other esoteric groups were not merely philosophical or mystical societies, but guardians of ancient knowledge, preserving what mainstream civilization lost to the waters? Symbols, rituals, and sacred geometry may encode truths about a world older than history admits, waiting for those with insight to uncover them. Out-of-place artifacts, parts, provide further evidence that advanced technologies existed long before their accepted timelines. From intricately carved stones to metallic objects with properties unknown to ancient metallurgy, These items challenge our understanding of technological progression. Could they be remnants of the lost civilizations erased by the Great Floods? And if so, what knowledge did these societies possess? Knowledge of engineering, astronomy, navigation, or even energy manipulation that allowed them to thrive and yet remain hidden once the waters rose? The implications are profound, suggesting that the linear narrative of human progress is incomplete, perhaps deliberately so, leaving us to reconstruct a past that was once whole but is now fragmented. Prophecies, legends, and esoteric teachings further deepen the mystery. The cyclical nature of time in many ancient cultures, the Maya, the Egyptians, and even the Norse, hints at an awareness of repeated cataclysms, of civilizations rising and falling in predictable cycles. Flood myths, when examined in conjunction with geological and archaeological evidence, suggest that these cycles were not merely symbolic, but grounded in the memory of real events. Prophets and seers may have encoded warnings about the fragility of civilization, the inevitability of natural forces, and the knowledge that the earth preserves secrets beyond the reach of ordinary observation. The story that emerges is one of erasure and preservation, of knowledge hidden in plain sight, surviving only through legend, ritual, and selective memory. The deliberate suppression of ancient knowledge cannot be overlooked. History, as recorded in textbooks and official accounts, is often curated, shaped by those in power, and sanitized to fit particular narratives. Could it be that pre-flood civilizations were intentionally erased from memory, their achievements dismissed as myth or heresy, their technologies lost or hidden? Archaeological finds that challenge mainstream understanding are frequently marginalized or ignored, leaving the public unaware of discoveries that could rewrite the story of human history. From sunken cities to out-of-place artifacts, evidence that does not fit the accepted timeline often faces skepticism or dismissal. The pattern is clear. What we are taught about the past may be only a fraction of the truth, carefully controlled to obscure the reality of civilizations lost to time and water. The climactic revelation, then, is not just a theory about ancient floods, but a reconsideration of what it means to be human. If advanced civilizations existed and were erased by cataclysmic events, then our understanding of human potential, ingenuity, and resilience must expand. We are heirs not to a single, unbroken civilization, but to a lineage interrupted by cataclysms, a chain of knowledge passed down in fragments, reconstructed anew in each generation. Myths, legends, and esoteric teachings are not mere fantasy. They're the scattered remnants of human memory, preserved against the erasing power of floods and time. Even more provocative is the suggestion that the hidden knowledge of these civilizations may still influence us today. Architectural techniques, mathematical principles, and astronomical insights embedded in ancient monuments may not have been discovered independently, but inherited, encoded in stone and story across millennia. Symbols used in secret societies, patterns in megalithic construction, and even aspects of religious and philosophical thought could all trace their origins to a pre-flood world. In this light, humanity is not simply a civilization that emerged from primitive beginnings. It is a survivor of repeated resets, a species that rebuilds, remembers, and occasionally glimpses the wisdom of worlds lost to water and time. The flood, then, becomes both destroyer and revealer. It erased civilizations with a force unmatched in human history. Yet in doing so, it created a narrative of survival, memory, and hidden knowledge that continues to echo through the ages. Our task, as modern observers, is to piece together these fragments, to interpret myths alongside geology, archaeology, and esoteric teachings, and to recognize that the history we know is incomplete. Beneath the waves, in sediment, in stone, and in legend, lie civilizations that challenge everything we assume about human development and the resilience of knowledge. In confronting this reality, we reach a sobering conclusion. The story of humanity is far deeper and more intricate than mainstream history allows. Civilizations advanced beyond our understanding may have existed, only to be erased by natural cataclysms, leaving fragments preserved in myth, architecture, and ritual. And if the past can be erased so completely, it begs the question, what do we not yet know? What knowledge, technologies, and histories lie hidden, waiting to be rediscovered, perhaps in the ruins beneath the sea or encoded in the symbols passed down through generations? The Great Flood, it seems, was not just a reset of the earth. It was a reset of memory itself, challenging us to recognize the fragility, resilience, and hidden depth of human history. As the final waves of history settle, we are left with a haunting and profound question. What lies beneath the surface of human memory, hidden by time, water, and the selective narratives of those who recorded history? For millennia, humanity has been shaped by forces far larger than itself. Catastrophic floods, rising oceans, and sudden shifts in climate that have erased civilizations without warning. These events did not merely destroy cities. They erased knowledge, traditions, and technologies, leaving behind myths, legends, and scattered artifacts as the only surviving testimony. What we often consider the beginning of civilization may, in reality, be just the latest chapter in a far older story, written over and over again, only to be partially lost each time the waters rose and the world was reshaped. Across the globe, submerged cities tell stories that textbooks have yet to fully acknowledge. Off the coast of India lies Dwarka, a city described in ancient texts and now verified underwater. Its streets, walls, and harbors hinting at a civilization of remarkable sophistication. In the Pacific, scattered ruins suggest human ingenuity on islands now swallowed by rising seas. The Yonaguni Formation in Japan presents terraces, steps, and geometric structures that seem impossibly precise for a civilization thousands of years ago. In the Mediterranean, sunken settlements reveal harbors and infrastructure that rival modern engineering. Each site, enigmatic and silent beneath the waves, suggests a civilization, or civilizations, whose knowledge has been almost entirely lost, leaving only traces for those willing to search. The question arises, if such civilizations existed, why do we know so little about them? Perhaps the answer lies in the fragility of memory and the deliberate suppression of knowledge. Catastrophic floods erased not only lives and cities, but also records, libraries, and artifacts. When survivors rebuilt, they often did so with fragments of knowledge preserved through oral tradition, ritual, and myth. Over generations, these fragments became stories, symbols, and allegories, interpreted in ways that made sense to those who inherited them. And in the process, the deeper truths, the technologies, the advanced sciences, the societal structures, were lost, encoded in myths that could be misunderstood or dismissed as fantasy. Esoteric teachings may have preserved some of this knowledge, hidden within secret societies, mystery schools, and sacred traditions. Symbols, rituals, and hidden texts appear in the teachings of the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Kabbalists, and even the alchemists of medieval Europe. These groups may have understood the fragility of human knowledge and sought to safeguard what survived of the pre-flood world. Sacred geometry, celestial alignments, and encoded wisdom could all be remnants of a civilization erased by water, carefully preserved so that the essence of human understanding would endure even if the material world was destroyed. In these hidden teachings, there are echoes of cities submerged, of technologies lost, of knowledge too dangerous or too precious to be left exposed to the vicissitudes of time. Prophecies and legends further support this vision. Flood myths, from Noah to Manu to Deucalion, tell of destruction and survival, of moral reckoning, and of the resilience of those who endure. Astronomical alignments and cyclical calendars, such as those of the Maya, suggest an awareness of repeating cataclysms, of civilizations rising and falling in predictable patterns. Could it be that these myths, often dismissed as fanciful or allegorical, preserve actual historical memory? Could they be warnings encoded in the language of story, guiding future generations toward survival and understanding? The recurrence of these myths across cultures, continents, and millennia suggests that humanity, even in its earliest epochs, was aware of the fragility of civilization and the power of water to erase the works of men. Archaeological evidence adds weight to these speculations. Out-of-place artifacts, intricate carvings, and megalithic structures that defy conventional explanation hint at knowledge and technology far beyond what mainstream history credits to their creators. Puma Punku in Bolivia, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the pyramids of Giza, all exhibit precision, alignment, and engineering skills that suggest advanced understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and material science. Could these monuments be remnants of a civilization that existed before recorded history, destroyed by floods or other natural catastrophes? And if so, what was lost along with them? Scientific knowledge, architectural mastery, or perhaps even social and political systems that rival our own? The cyclical nature of floods introduces another layer of mystery. Geological studies suggest that catastrophic inundations were not isolated events, but occurred repeatedly, reshaping coastlines and erasing populations. Entire civilizations may have risen, flourished, and then been obliterated, leaving only faint traces. Each cycle would have forced humanity to rebuild, rediscover, and reinterpret the knowledge of previous generations. In this sense, human history is not linear. It is cyclical, punctuated by cataclysmic resets that obscure the continuity of civilization. The myths, prophecies, and esoteric teachings that survive are, perhaps, the only threads connecting us to a past we can barely comprehend. Modern science, with its satellite imaging, sonar mapping, and LiDAR technology, now allows us to glimpse these lost worlds with unprecedented clarity. Underwater archaeology has revealed city grids, temples, and harbors long hidden beneath the waves. LiDAR scans uncover hidden ruins and jungles that have been assumed untouched for centuries. Even desert landscapes preserve faint traces of lost civilizations, preserved in soil, rock, and the patterns of ancient waterways. These technological revelations suggest that the past is not entirely lost, only hidden, awaiting patient and persistent exploration. Each discovery strengthens the notion that advanced societies existed, were destroyed, and yet continue to leave whispers for those attuned to find them. The implications extend beyond archaeology and history. If floods could erase civilizations before ours, it raises profound questions about humanity's resilience and fragility today. Rising seas, climate change, and ecological instability mirror the forces that reshaped the ancient world. The stories and warnings preserved in myth, prophecy, and esoteric teaching take on new urgency. They remind us that human knowledge is fragile, that civilizations can vanish almost overnight, and that survival requires foresight, adaptability, and respect for the forces of nature. In this sense, the past is a guide, a warning, and an invitation to learn from what was lost, to preserve what remains, and to consider carefully the legacy we will leave for future generations. Yet amidst the mystery and caution, there is awe. The very idea that advanced civilizations may have existed before ours challenges the limits of imagination. It reframes human potential, suggesting that we are heirs to ingenuity, knowledge, and culture far older than we realize. The myths, ruins, and artifacts that remain are more than remnants. They are windows into a world that thrived, achieved greatness, and yet was ultimately humbled by the power of nature. In exploring these echoes of the past, we confront the possibility that humanity's story is richer, deeper, and more extraordinary than textbooks admit. And perhaps most hauntingly, the past continues to whisper beneath the waves and across the sands. Submerged cities, megalithic monuments, and encoded teachings are fragments of a narrative almost lost to time, hinting at civilizations that achieved mastery over their environment, only to vanish when the waters came. These fragments challenge us to reconsider what we know, to question the assumptions of linear progress, and to imagine the hidden histories that lie beneath our feet and beneath the oceans. Every discovery, no matter how small, is a reminder that human history is layered, complex, and far more mysterious than we can comprehend. In contemplating the legacy of these pre-flood civilizations, we are faced with a profound reflection on our own place in time. Humanity has survived, adapted, and rebuilt countless times, preserving fragments of memory, knowledge, and culture through millennia. The myths, prophecies, and hidden teachings are not merely relics of the past. They are a testament to resilience, foresight, and the enduring human spirit. They remind us that even in the face of forces that can erase cities and knowledge, the essence of civilization, the curiosity, ingenuity, and desire to understand, can endure. As the documentary draws to a close, we are left with an unsettling yet awe-inspiring thought. The history we know may be only a shadow of what truly was. Floods erased not only physical structures, but also the memory of civilizations whose knowledge may have rivaled or exceeded our own. Yet in myths, legends, and submerged ruins, traces remain, waiting for those who can see beyond the surface. The past is not dead. It speaks to us in whispers, in the alignment of stones, the geometry of ruins, and the encoded wisdom of esoteric teachings. It reminds us that history is fragile, knowledge is precious, and human potential is boundless, if only we remember, listen, and seek. And so, the story concludes not with finality, but with reflection. Humanity is a thread in an intricate tapestry, one woven over cycles of creation, destruction, and renewal. The great floods were more than natural disasters. They were resets, erasing civilizations while leaving whispers of knowledge behind. As we look to the oceans, the ruins, and the myths, we are invited to imagine the civilizations that came before, to honor their achievements, and to remain vigilant against the forces that could erase us. The Earth remembers more than we do. And perhaps, just perhaps, the lost civilizations of the past are not gone forever. They wait beneath the waves, in myths, and in the hidden depths of human memory, challenging us to seek, to understand, and to imagine the extraordinary story of our world.